In every fandom, there's a layer of mystery, and Pokemon is no exception. With the franchise being around all the way back since the 1990s, there's naturally going to be a lot to cover. So today I'll be discussing the Pokemon Iceberg. I was originally going to cover one of these, but I really don't like where some things are placed, so I made my own. You're looking at the ultimate iceberg. The deeper you go, the more mysterious and obscure things we'll get. I was inspired by Mishkaz, so if you haven't seen his Mario 64 Iceberg yet, you should. Well, I better stop wasting time because this video is going to be a long one. Where better to start than one of the most infamous Pokemon rumors? In Generation 1, there was a truck located near the SSN. Many people speculated what its purpose was. That's when the playground rumors kicked in. Apparently, according to the rumors, a Mew could be found under their truck. Kids in the 90s believed almost anything, and making Mew completely unobtainable didn't really help. But no matter how hard anyone tried, they weren't able to move the truck. Missing No is another classic part of Generation 1. Everyone and their Raichu has heard about this guy, if you can even consider it a guy. Missing No has a bunch of different forms, ranging from the classic Tetracell block, a ghost, and an Aerodactyl skeleton. M is a name shared by glitch Pokemon found in Generation 1. It can delete your save file due to storage systems being unable to process level 0 Pokemon. The GS Ball was introduced in the Pokemon anime in the episode titled Pokeball Peril. In the episode, Professor Ivy wants Professor Oak to examine the Pokeball since she can't open it. Ash then has to go retrieve it from the Orange Archipelago, which, that in itself, creates a whole different arc. Once he brought it to Professor Oak, he didn't even know what to do with it either, so he charged Ash to take it to the Pokeball Master himself, Kurt. Once he brought it to him, it was never heard from again. In an interview with this dude in 2008, he explained that the GS Ball was meant to contain Celebi, and it was going to be the focus of a large arc in Johto, but it was decided that Celebi would be starring in the 4th Pokemon movie, so the story arc just seemed to be redundant, and it was eventually shelved. Mew and Ditto have a lot more similarities than you might think. They're both pink, and their shinies are the same shade of blue, but the similarities go way beyond appearances. Ditto and Mew are the only two Pokemon that know the move Transform, and they both weigh 8.8 pounds. In Pokemon Yellow, you can encounter Ditto in the Pokemon Mansion, where research on Mew was made. They had to have made some mistakes before cloning Mew. So is every Ditto just one of those mistakes? This was spoken about a lot when X and Y first released. In Lumio City, there's a building with multiple floors. If you go to the second floor using the elevator, a scene plays. The light cuts out, and a Hex Maniac appears. It moves, but lacks a walking animation. She says the phrase, "No, you're not the one." Then it disappears without a trace. Pretty spooky, I know, if you're not expecting it, but some people think you can find her again on the 4th floor of a hotel in Kalos. She says, "Don't talk to me. If you do, I won't hear the elevator." There's been a lot of speculation, but there's no definitive answer as of yet. Before Gold and Silver were released in America, there was an image of a certain blue rodent. Many people weren't sure what it was. Some thought it was a Pokegod, I'll explain later, since it shared a few similarities with Pikachu. It was dubbed Peekaboo. When the games finally were released, it was discovered that this Pokegod was just Meryl. Lavender Town has always been pretty creepy. It's overall just gloomy, and there's even a Pokemon graveyard known as the Pokemon Tower here. But that's not the main focus of this infamous creepypasta. How the story goes is that the original copies of Red and Green had a Lavender Town theme with higher frequencies that made Japanese children commit suicide. Some people claim to see spectrogram images in the music. Sounds pretty stupid now, but back then people were pretty scared. Everyone knows that the Pokemon world is filled with creatures called Pokemon, but what happened to the animals? In the early days of the Pokemon anime, animals like fish, birds, and even mongoose were referenced to and even seen. And how does the Pokédex know what animals are? The land shark Pokemon? How would you know? Pokemon sizes have always been pretty weird. In the anime, they've been pretty inconsistent, but in the games, they've done a decent job. But are they measured from head to tail? Or head to toe? This was never really clarified and might explain why Fur is so tall according to the Pokédex. Another classic theory. This one is about Gengar actually being Clefable's shadow. They both cannot hit each other due to their typings, at least before Generation 6, and the Fairy line was actually going to be the face of Pokemon, so I can see their roles being similar to Jack Frost and Black Frost from the Megami Tensei series. Some people think that when the Brass Tower was struck by lightning and burned down, the 3 Pokemon inside that turned into the legendary beasts were the 3 evolutions. This makes sense because Virbank City has an emphasis on evolutions because of the Kimono Girls, but it really makes no sense. They could have easily escaped if they were evolved. I think that there were just 3 Eevees, so them being trapped would make a lot more sense. It'd be a lot more difficult to escape without elemental powers. When they eventually did perish, they were resurrected as Entei, Raikou, and Suicune. Nobody really knows what's under Diglett. Fans have speculated, but there's never been an official confirmation. There was a line muttered by Diglett in a mystery dungeon game about it feeling his feet or something, but who knows what horrors awaits underneath. Mew 3 is another playground rumor. There's certainly a Mew 3, right? Well, it was joked about in the original Pocket Monsters manga, but other than that, Mew 3 is just a myth. When Mega Evolution was first teased, everyone thought Mega Mewtwo Y was Mew 3, and I don't blame them. People used to speculate that Butterfree and Venomoth had their evolutionary lines switched, the reason being that Venonat looks a lot more like Butterfree and vice versa. Cubone is a Pokemon who wears its dead mother's skull. But who exactly is the mother? Many have speculated that the mother is none other than Kangaskhan. If you remove Cubone's skull, it looks suspiciously like a Kangaskhan baby. A leak revealing beta designs for many Generation 1 Pokemon shows that Marowak was originally supposed to have a pouch. Interesting. In the Generation 7 games, the Cubone line is able to call upon Kangaskhan for support. A bit too suspicious if you ask me. Ash's father hasn't really been talked about in the Pokemon anime. Some people suspect Professor Oak, others say it's Mr. Mime, but I believe it to be Silver from the Pokemon Chronicles special. The way he reacts when Richie mentions Ash is really strange. He has a bit of a surprised reaction, which you wouldn't really expect if you just told some random dude a random name. So as we all know, the end of the first episode of the Pokemon anime features Ash and Pikachu looking up at the sky after getting attacked by a horde of Spearows, and seeing the legendary bird Ho-Oh. But what exactly does this mean for both of them? Ho-Oh is said to grant eternal happiness to those who gaze upon its feathers, so what exactly makes Ash happy? Going on a never-ending journey with his new partner Pikachu? That might explain why he never ages. Or maybe it's just the animation not changing, but it's fun to think about. Obviously, not everyone in the Pokemon world is vegan, so where does all the meat come from? Are there milk tank slaughterhouses scattered throughout the world? Or is it all just substitute meat? There was a set of flashing lights caused by Pikachu shocking some rockets. Those flashing lights caused 685 children in Japan to have seizures. Porygon and its evolutions were banned from appearing in the anime, even though it's Pikachu's fault. Back in Generation 1, Jinx had a slightly different design. Instead of being the purple we all know and, well, no. Her skin is pitch black. Many people mistook this for blackface, and don't really blame them. What Game Freak was trying to go for, or at least what I hope they were going for, was a style in Japan known as Ganguru. Ganguru was popularized in the 1990s and features girls with tan faces and contrasting makeup. This is another classic theory. There's a lot of these at the tip of the iceberg, I know. Basically, when Blue challenges you on the SSN, he uses his beloved Eradicate. After you inevitably defeat him, there's no Pokemon centers on the boat, so instead of asking for help, he just lets his Eradicate die. I guess he was doing a Nuzlocke or something, because the next time you see him and he's in the Pokemon Tower, he mutters the phrase, "What are you doing here? Your Pokemon don't look dead!" And he's missing his Eradicate. If he kept a consistent team, and this is the only time he switched out a party member, I'd believe this theory. But he's always swapping party members. Eradicate just sucks, so he just threw him in the box. This one's pretty simple. I'm just gonna put a picture of the screen. So in Generation 1, Lieutenant Surge states that electric Pokemon saved him during the war. But what war is he talking about? Unless he's a fake war veteran, there was no prior war in Generation 1. But I'd rather know why than when. During the Generation 3 era, many people spread playground rumors about the Moss Deep space station. Some say you have to wait until the rocket launch timer reaches 0. Once you do, you would be sent to the moon and you could fight Deoxys. A bug in Generation 1 allows you to fish in the statues you find at gyms or in any room of the Elite Four, but when using a Super Rod, the game will say it looks like there's nothing here. When you find Bill's laboratory, there seems to be something behind it. Some say Pokegods were located there. Others say that's where you find the other starters. But nah, that's just Bill's marijuana farm. So back in 1999, Nintendo released an issue of Nintendo Power for April Fools. It claimed that you could get Mario's favorite dino pal Yoshi by evolving it from Dragonite. Only problem is that a lot of the issues took months to get to their destination, so it was less obvious that it was an April Fool's prank. Buried Alive was meant to be the final boss of the original Red and Green until it was scrapped. Or that's what the creepypasta wants you to believe anyway. When he battles you, he sends out a decaying white hand. This might be a reference to the girl at the Pokemon Tower talking about a white hand on your soldier. If you lose, he just eats you alive. In Pokemon Black, there's a cutscene where you follow Zoroark into N's castle. Once you make it there, the Zoroark is nowhere to be found, but N is there. We know from Agatha that she and Oak were rivals at some point, so it's fair to assume that they were both trainers at one point as well. When he gets to the Pokemon League, Blue is champion, but who did he have to defeat to become champion? Oak. It's Oak. There's an unused boss in Red and Blue where you battle Oak, so it's likely that he was the champion. Take a look at Cloyster. Does it look familiar? Well, what about now? People theorize that when Cloyster inevitably dies, it becomes a Ghastly. Ghastly comes after Cloyster in the National Dex. They both turn blue and shiny, they both have a capture rate of 190, and both are 5'11". Genesect is said to have been an ancient Pokemon from 300 million years ago who's been modified. But what Pokemon is it? Another Pokemon that was around 300 million years ago is Kabutops. Wobbuffet seems pretty normal at first, until you take a look at some of its Pokédex entries. It often talks about how it tries to hide its tail, kinda weird, and it gets even weirder when you notice its tail has eyes. So, is the real Pokemon actually the tail? And is the blue blob just a diversion? It would make sense seeing how he's a punching bag Pokemon. The Pokegods are the holy grail of playground rumors. Kids claim that they evolved their Charizard into Charcoal, or their Mewtwo into Mew 3. Basically, it's just fake ascended evolutions, or Pokemon that come after the original 150, like Ho-Oh or Togepi. There's some unique ones though, like Doomsday. I've covered Gengar and Ghastly. Now it's time for Haunter. It's speculated that a Voltorb is a Pokeball haunted by Haunter. How fitting. It's trapped because it lacks the button to release it, so it explodes in anger. In the first Pokemon anime, we see a girl who is never seen in the actual show. Some people think it might be Green, but it's actually just the last trainer. Basically, the Japanese intro makes a joke about looking for Pokemon anywhere, even under a girl's skirt. There wasn't really any recognizable character with a skirt in Pokemon at the time, so they just used a generic class. So an established rule of Pokemon is that evolutions don't trigger until you reach a certain level. But I guess some trainers drug their Pokemon because they're evolving early. Lance, for example, had a level 40 Dragonite, a level 48 Dragonite, and a level 49 Dragonite. Dragonite doesn't even evolve till level 55! Not only did the scumbag have underleveled Pokemon, he also had illegal moves. Lance's Dragonite knows Barrier, but Dragonite can't even learn Barrier until Generation 6. Lance's Aerodactyl knows Rock Slide in Generation 2. Aerodactyl can't learn Rock Slide until Gen 3. We need to get this scum off of the champion board. He's a scum, I tell you. He's... Pokemon Creepy Black is a creepypasta about a bootleg copy of Pokemon Red, where other trainers in Pokemon can be killed. The creepypasta actually came out before the official Black, so yeah. Mimikyu is a Pokemon who puts up a disguise so it looks like Pikachu. Granted, it looks kinda bad, but they're doing their best. Apparently anyone who sees Mimikyu's true form dies, so what terrifying creature is beneath the cloak? Vietnamese Crystal is a bootleg copy of Pokemon Crystal that became notorious for its horrible mistranslations. Although it is unknown exactly when the bootlegged version was made, it's speculated that it was in circulation as early as 2001. It was likely translated from a Chinese language bootleg of the game, which itself is translated from a Japanese version, which explains the horrible translations. In this world, Pokemon are called elves, and your rival loves the word trashy. He has an entire monologue where he just repeats trashy a lot. Having two identical Spinda is one of the rarest occurrences in Pokemon, even rarer than encountering a shiny. Spinda's design are based off of personality values, and there's over 4 billion different possible personality values. So, the chances of having two identical Spinda are extremely low. Plus, any of these designs can be shiny, so if you count shinies, there are over 8.5 billion possible designs. That's more people than alive on Earth. In Catherine's game files, there's a bunch of unused tracks. It's pretty cool. There's some songs from other Atlas games like Persona, but strangely enough, there's a battle theme from Pokemon Diamond and Pearl thrown in there. Diamond and Pearl remakes confirmed. The The Unown King is the villain of a creepypasta called Unown King's Cursed. He's an ancient Pokemon that can sleep for thousands of years. When he wakes up, he kills anything that crosses his path. One day, a boy receives a copy of Pokemon Silver during Christmas, which had a complete Pokédex, and decides to continue the game, following the instructions that a man had given him, which will inevitably wake up the Unown King. There was an item in Pokemon X and Y with no context. The player is given a strange souvenir by an NPC who hints it's from a different region. This region was later revealed to be Alola. The bird type was a scrapped Pokemon type from Generation 1. It was most likely replaced by the flying type. Both Missing No and M are bird type and normal type. Glitch City can be accessed by performing a glitch using the timer in the Safari Zone. Glitch City is a corrupted version of whichever map the player was on when they ran out of time. The city will have swapped tiles everywhere, unreadable signs, and so on and so forth. Sea Mawile is one of the most eerie places in Pokemon. It's a wrecked oil rig that fell into the sea after the corporation running it went under, and now it's plagued by treasure hunters and haunted spirit tomb. You find piles of books and files on unemployment and the workers losing their livelihoods. The workers were horribly overworked and underpaid. No paying during overtime is mentioned in one of these files. There's other documents too, so what exactly are they hiding? The Japanese jungle booster box displayed what appears to be an elongated Executor. This is most likely what the inspiration behind Alolan Executor we see today. They look exactly the same. In the first Pokemon movie, there was a scene from a trailer that never showed up in the movie. That scene depicted what looked like an older Misty with a young girl, presumably a child. Was that Ash and Misty's child? 20 years later, there was an interview that debunked this theory. Apparently that red-headed girl was supposed to be a generic woman, not an older Misty, even though they looked suspiciously similar. On your way to the Pokemon Kalos League, you were able to see what looks like a hidden town or pond in the distance. Maybe it's a cut event? Who knows? So the ore region is mostly a wasteland. It's based on Arizona, so that may be why, but let's ignore that for just a second. What exactly caused it to look like a wasteland in the first place? There's a bunch of ruins all over the place, so there might have been a war. Throughout the Pokemon anime, we see a woman and her daughter. According to the theory, Ash and Pokemon don't exist. Everything is simply a story told by the mother to her daughter. The events we see in the anime occur in her daughter's head, which explains why Ash doesn't grow up. Every region is a different story. The theory states that there is a fourth member of the creation trio. They're all based on the three types of matter, but there's one missing: plasma. The original dragon was probably fire and electric type. These are the two types of plasma. Kyurem is supposed to represent the absence of energy, being an ice type, while Reshiram and Zekrom is the presence of energy. Project Azoth was a plan to bring the world back to its first state. Azoth was a term used in alchemy, referring to mercury, which was believed to exist at the base of all other metals. The generation that followed had a ton to do with alchemy, so perhaps they were hinting at it here? Have you ever stopped and wondered what Eternatus' Eternamax form was supposed to be? No? Well, too bad. There's a theory that claims it's the corrupted hand of God, or Arceus, whichever sounds cooler. It may be based off the biblical seven-headed dragon that in the Book of Revelations throws 1/3 of all stars down to Earth and is banished by the Hebrew giants, which ultimately leads to the end of time. This might explain the origin of the Wishing Star and the Darkest Day. In Diamond and Pearl, there are some books which state that human and Pokemon were once the same. This is widely accepted, so far to the point that it was normal to have relationships with Pokemon. And if that's true, maybe that explains all the humanoid Pokemon we see. Ron Paul was running for president back in 2012. The guy who originally sung the first Pokemon opening made a parody version supporting Ron Paul. That's it. Mewtwo strikes back when Ash runs from the cloning machines to save Pikachu from being cloned. The machine tries to stop him. But wait, hold on. Those look like human bones. Are they made using modified bones? Mewtwo killed all the scientists in the lab before rebuilding it as New Island, with his fortress and all. So does that mean he used the bones from the scientists to create a machine? Where else would he have gotten it? It's not like he's being funded. In Red and Green's betas, Erica was a ghost-type gym leader. Her sprite shows her kimono right over left, which is reserved for the deceased at funerals. Golem and Machamp looks different compared to their pre-evolutions. Golem becomes more reptilian and loses a set of arms when it evolves, and Machamp gains an extra set of arms and has a more human face. People think that an exchange similar to Karrablast and Shelmet was planned. These two Pokemon only evolved if they're traded with each other, so maybe something similar was supposed to happen with Golem and Machamp but was ultimately scrapped. Recently, the beta for Diamond and Pearl was leaked. There was a ton of cool beta designs that we saw, like Garchomp, and the Chad himself knows pass. I'm not going to go over everything, but some of these sprites are obviously just an idea, like Arceus. So there are a bunch of unused Pokemon game names. Most of these are put in place so ripoffs and fan games aren't made. Delta Emerald, Gray, and Z are some, but there are other weird ones like Pokemon Crimson and Pokemon Brown. G-Max Toxtricities in Sun and Moon. As a poster at the Game Freak office, you can see the color scheme and the coil-like tail. Kinda crazy how something so small can be so important. If you don't know, Porygon Z is a corrupted version of Porygon. Porygon is a reference to polygonal graphics. Porygon 2 is an upgrade to smooth things out, so what would Porygon 3 be? Maybe a hyper-realistic Porygon from a bad creepypasta. In the original Pokemon anime, there's an episode where Ash and friends go to Bill's lighthouse. On the door, there are some pictures of the legendary birds and some other Pokemon like Ditto and Arcanine. But Mewtwo is on the door as well. How does Bill know about Mewtwo? He's someone's science fair project gone wrong, so either he was involved, or Mewtwo is somewhere out there. Or maybe it's just a coincidence. On November 15th, 1997, an early playable demo of Pokemon Gold and Silver was shown at Space World 97. Considered to be lost in time, a groundbreaking revelation happened on May 26, 2018. An anonymous user unexpectedly dumped ROMs of the elusive demos online. So, now we have all these really cool beta sprites. Originally, we were supposed to get Pokemon Pink alongside Pokemon Yellow. Mention of Pokemon Pink can be found in ancient source code for Pokemon Yellow, which includes test audio for more voices from the anime to be implemented into the game. How we know all this is from a Nintendo server breach all the way back in 2018. The guy was arrested, but he shared his findings with his friends, and they're slowly making their way into the public. In the Space World 97 demo, instead of starting a new Bark Town, the town is called Silent Hill. It was probably changed to avoid comparison to a horror game released during development called Silent Hill. Or maybe they thought the name was lame? I don't know. Imposter Oak, a Pokemon TCG exclusive character, was originally going to appear in Pokemon Gold and Silver as a villain. He looks just like Professor Oak, but he has a scar on his forehead. No explanation was given as to who he was, but he appears in multiple different Pokemon cards. The Space World 97 demo, Imposter Oak has a sprite. He was probably going to be involved in the plot, but was scrapped between 1997 and 1999. This would explain Imposter Oak's appearance in the TCG, which was released back in 1996. Since Oak appears at the Goldenrod radio tower to record his daily radio show, Team Rocket probably hired some sort of imposter to help infiltrate the radio station. Puka is a Pikachu that debuted in the Pokemon episode Pikahuna. Victor tells Ash that he has no idea where Puka originally came from. Puka is very different from most Pikachus. For one, he has blue eyes, just like an Alolan Raichu. Puka can also sense big waves coming to the beach where he lives, causing his eyes to glow with strange aura to form around him. If that doesn't scream Psychic type, I don't know what does. And he loves to surf. This is just way too coincidental. Let me guess, Puka loves pancakes too. Mystery zones are the void, often seen in Pokemon games. You may not notice it at first, but once you notice it, it's hard not to. In Diamond and Pearl, it's actually possible to go into a mystery zone and go to event locations using this method, which is pretty crazy. Prior to Black and White's release, someone who was known as a very credible source leaked that there would be 157 Pokemon in Black and White, and that a Green Cobra Pokemon was one of them. There was 156 Pokemon, however, in the next generation we got Zygarde, a Green Cobra Pokemon. Kinda weird how Zygarde would have had a role in 3 generations. Imakuni is a name of a costumed character played by this dude, and was used to promote Pokemon cards. Imakuni appeared in many promotional live events conducted in Japan between 1997 and 2002, but isn't around much nowadays. Pokemon Picross is an unreleased puzzle game for the Game Boy and Game Boy Color, announced in various game magazines in spring of 1999. It was developed by Jupiter Corporations, but sadly never saw the light of day. However, in 2015, a Pokemon Picross game was finally released. The Instant Bike Shop text glitch can be found in Pokemon Red and Blue, but not Pokemon Yellow. If you talk to the shop owner while pressing B through the dialogue, it will temporarily enable instant text. Speedrunners debated if this should be banned or not. Ultimately, though, it was allowed because you could get kicked out of an instant text mode by pressing start, healing your Pokemon, or changing routes. The ruins of Alph lines up with Hiroshima when Johto is superimposed onto Japan. The people who were killed in the blast left a black outline made of ash. Unown looks similar to these, so people connected the dots together, and this was the result. Because of complicated copyright laws with Shepro and the dubbing company in Lebanon, we most likely won't get the Arab dub of Late Johto to Advanced Generation. The Arab dub was switched from being based off 4Kids to the original Japanese version. No more jelly-filled donuts, I guess. Back in the 90s, Pokemania was at its peak. Everyone wanted to get in on it, and Burger King was no exception. They made these toys that came in Pokeballs, but the toys weren't the problem. It was the container. It was a choking hazard, so they had to recall all the toys. Deoxys is known for its many different forms. There's a form that excels in every stat. Pokerus is known to increase the rate of your Pokemon's EP. So did Pokerus originally come from Deoxys? The Godstone is a key item found in the code of Black and White, and even their sequels. It has no use whatsoever, but it was likely used for an event Pokemon, but that's just speculation. The Lock Capsule is an unreleased key item from a special event. When playing Heart Gold and Soul Silver, the Lock Capsule would have been transferred to Black and White via a relocator. When received, the player would have taken it to Mr. Locke in Castelia City. He would unlock it and give the player TM95, aka Snarl, although it's impossible to get without using cheese. What's weird is that it's obtainable as an item generation 4, 5, but after that, there's only reference to in the code of almost all the Pokemon games following it. The stage based on the Sprout Tower from Pokemon Gold and Silver was considered in the development of Melee. Ultimately though, it was scrapped, but at least we got Poke Floats. Pool Trainer Nick is notorious for being one of the most rigged NPCs in the game. Basically, if you ever saw him in a bug catching competition, just restart your game. In the Space World 97 demo though, the main character had a brother named Ken. Ken's sprite was reused as Pool Trainer Nick's sprite. In an episode of the original anime, James is getting swallowed by his weeping bell. He screams something inaudible though. When played in reverse, he says, "Leo Burnett and 4 kids are the devil."
Leo Burnett and 4 kids are the devil! Leo Burnett!
This might have been his voice actor making a joke, or maybe working conditions weren't too great at the time. In non-English releases of Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, Registeel's sprite was edited because the pose it was in looked a lot like a Nazi salute. It was changed in all versions of Platinum. In 2009, a man dressed as James from Team Rocket hacked a New York Pokemon event with racist Gengars. This was done by modifying the ROMs of a DS distribution card that shops like GameStop used. You could modify the ROM and distribute a Pokemon just like an official event. Somebody made a racist Gengar named the N-word, injected it into the ROM, used a flashcard to run the ROM, and took their DS to Nintendo World for people to download Gengar. He put flyers up and everything. The Gengar was equipped with racist moves such as Thief and Slack Off. Balio along with Pinister were the names given to 2 fake Pokemon evolutions for Poplio, that were posted on 4chan mid-2016 as an alleged leak, and people seem to love this evolution the most. The third was created on May 16, 2016, and allegedly leaked the final evolutions for the Gen 7 starters. Obviously it wasn't real, but I would take Balio over Primarina any day. These were 2 episodes of the Pokemon Black and White anime that were scheduled to air in Japan on March 17, 2011, but was postponed because of an earthquake and tsunami. TV Tokyo said in 2011 that it would air someday, but this statement was never updated upon. It was removed late in 2018. The episode's events have been removed from continuity entirely. These 2 episodes were supposed to impact the plot heavily. Essentially, Team Rocket were supposed to have a gang war with Team Plasma. It would have marked the anime debut of Team Plasma and the return of Looker, but due to Team Plasma's debut being delayed, the Plasma Grunts were never shown in their original outfits from Pokemon Black and White. Victini's name comes from Victory and Tiny. Its Pokedex entry states that it creates limitless energy inside its body and releases it. Victini can be found at the bottom of the Liberty Garden Tower. It's based off of the Liberty Island in New York Harbor. In World War II, scientists at the Manhattan Project created Little Boy and Fat Man, 2 nuclear weapons to use against Japan. Little Boy was tiny compared to Fat Man. Its limitless energy is a pretty clear reference to nuclear power, and its fire typing is probably a reference to nuclear fireballs. Victini is America's victory bomb. In 1993, a console known as a Sega Pico was released. It used book-shaped cartridges known as Storyware. Each time a player turns the page on the cartridge, the screen changes to replicate the image in the book. 3 Pokemon games were released after 2002. This is the only time Sega had a license to a Nintendo property. A lot of water types are based off of weapons, like Blastoise having cannons, or Sharpedo being a torpedo, or Remoraid being a revolver. There's a lot more examples of Pokemon like this, but could they have been used in a war? In the war referenced by Lieutenant Surge, he said electric-type Pokemon saved him during the war, and water types are weak to electric types. Camellia was supposed to be a second rival in the game Pokemon Masters, but was cut. She was found in the game files, but later on during the updates, she was cut out entirely. Pokemon are not held in Pokeballs against their will. We have seen many different instances of Pokemon breaking free just because they want to. Ash wasn't able to keep Pikachu inside his Pokeball, Misty's Psyduck broke out whenever it felt like, Jessie's Wobbuffet broke out all the time. If you don't have enough gym badges, your Pokemon will flat out disobey you. Pokemon are perfectly free creatures that choose to serve their trainers. If a trainer and their Pokemon have a falling out, or the Pokemon doesn't feel happy or safe with their trainer, they can just leave. It's not like a trainer can really fight back a fire-breathing monster. Pokemon stay with their trainers because they've proven their worth by battling and catching them. Pokemon can make their own decisions, so in a sense, yes, they're sentient. When Pokemon X and Y were first released, many people were encountering what seemed to be monochrome Pokemon. Monochrome Pokemon began as a rumor, and were allegedly rarer than shinies, but it turned out to be just a glitch that would happen if a Pokemon's color palette didn't load in properly. The Pokemon would revert back to normal after being caught. I really wish this was real, but oh well. The 3DS Pokemon games are almost 1 GB larger than they should be. The reason being that each area has its own texture and character database instead of reusing the same one. Some cutscenes even use duplicate maps instead of using the overworld one. In Sun and Moon's files, there are over 50 Lily models that are copy and pasted throughout the game's code. Lana's concept art shows a drawing of her and her twin sister. The art depicts Harper and Sarah as Lana's older sisters, with Lana being the youngest. In the final version, Harper and Sarah are actually Lana's younger twin sisters. Apparently Harper and Sarah's anime designs are deep in the game's code, but I couldn't find anything while researching. Recently, it was discovered that in Diamond and Pearl's code, there were different encounter rates depending on the date. On 9/11 and the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, for example, there's a 10% less chance of encountering Pokemon. However, some holidays only have a 5% decrease in spawn rate. But we also found out Pokemon are more likely to spawn on certain holidays such as Christmas Eve, the 4th of July, and St. Patrick's Day. Okay, so allegedly, the term Bulbapedo comes from an alleged scandal that occurred within the Bulba Garden forums. The mods allegedly had a private section of a forum and some illegal shady stuff went down in there. Apparently the mods included young teens, and allegedly there were older mods receiving nudes. Apparently an admin from the site made a comment on the VP board of 4chan about underage love having no age, or something along that lines. I'm saying apparently and allegedly because I'm not sure if any of those claims are true. I found some sources, but apparently 4chan is known for hating Bulba Garden. That's why I'm making this though, finding the deep mysteries of Pokemon, so take these claims with a grain of salt. A lot, and I mean a lot of people in competitive Pokemon have been caught using hacked Pokemon. The hardest part about VGC is team building. They don't really want to waste time messing with RNG via breeding or resetting for legendaries. The whole competitive scene is just really sketchy, and people suspect a lot of top players of cheating. It's hard to tell though, unless they accidentally slip up and make an illegal Pokemon. Calvin Riley was out playing Pokemon Go when he was abruptly shot out of nowhere. The police ruled out that it was a robbery because his phone and wallet were untouched. A reward of $100,000 was put up for any information, but it didn't work. The case of Calvin Riley was unfortunately never solved. Stanford University conducted a study on the human brain. The study explored humans' developmental window, during which the visual cortex forms regions that recognize specific objects like faces, words, and surprisingly Pokemon. The results showed that these Pokemon selective regions exist in the same brain areas among people who played Pokemon as children. Apparently it is irreversible, so we have a region in our brain that is dedicated to Pokemon now. So apparently the Homestuck forums banned fanfics and fan art of the characters getting pregnant a while ago. In response, Toby Fox composed a 15-minute rock opera about male pregnancy and posted it on the forums for the memes, getting banned in the process. This absolute mad lad snuck in the background music from it and put it into Sword and Shield as the Battle Tower theme. In the original Pocket Monsters manga, the first Pokemon Red catches is an unnamed Pokemon. It escapes shortly after, but it looks suspiciously like the scrubbing bubbles. Primordial soup is said to have been here when the universe was first forming. The first bacteria were formed from it and is said to be the ancestor of all life. Since Ditto can turn into any Pokemon, people think he's Primordial soup. So apparently the guy who illustrated the electric tail of Pikachu was a hentai artist, and from what I heard, this is pretty common in the world of manga, but he illustrated a doujin of Jesse and James having some fun. And even Misty makes an appearance in the end. In hindsight, it should have been really obvious that he was a hentai artist. Just look at Misty's breasts! This video took a lot longer than expected. It was originally supposed to come out, like, about a month ago. I know I probably missed a ton of things, so comment something to add on to the iceberg. I'll try my best to reply to every single one. Anyways, thank you so much for watching.